Hello, everyone. Welcome back to AJC and the Web Devs. This is episode 4, and we got Nick Taylor with us. How's it going, Nick?
Pretty good, pretty good. How you doing, Anthony?
Doing good. I always call you Nicky T from Jersey, Canada, because Nicky
Yeah,
T sounds like
Jersey.
someone who would be from Jersey, but you were not from Jersey. You were from an entirely different country.
Yeah. No, I'm from Montreal in Quebec, Canada. So East Coast represent. Uh, yeah, it's the origin story of my handle is it's not really that exciting, but like I use Nikki T online. But when I know you know, but I used to play rugby, and uh, it's a pretty common thing in sports that people call you by your last name. Like people say, "Hey Taylor, pass me the ball" or whatever, but sometimes they would just call me Nikki T for short. It's just easy to say. And then I created a terrible handle called Nikki T Online because you're online, obviously, if you're on the internet. So it's a terrible name, but I just kind of stuck with it, and here we are today.
And it sounds like you've been able to hang on to that handle across most channels. So that's the main thing. Is like I think it doesn't really matter what your handle is as long as it's
Yeah,
unique.
exactly. Yeah, it is unique, and it's like you said, consistent everywhere. It'd be cool if I could have like Nick or something, but like unless I registered all these services like when they literally just started, it's not happening. So I think I'll still sleep well at night.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. We've had a bit of a hiatus from AJC and the web devs, but we're back now, and I'm like really stoked to dig back into this stuff. You're going to be talking a little bit about SSR here. I had proposed this topic to you because I know that you are working a decent amount on this type of stuff at your place of work, Netlify. And so, why don't you let our listeners know or viewers know kind of what you do and where you're coming
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I've worked in several industries over the years. I've been in the industry for a while, professionally since 2002. But my latest role is at Netlify. I work on the ecosystem stuff there, specifically frameworks. So, basically anything frameworks related, and that includes SSR, client side rendering, SSG, static site generation, all kinds of stuff, and then like a ton of frameworks too. Like Gatsby, Remix, Astro, Next.js. There's a whole bunch of new frameworks out too. Like Fresh, coming out of the Dino folks. There's this kind of ties into SSR, server side rendering, but like there's this new generation of frameworks that are kind of like HTML first, which ties into the server side rendering story. So yeah, I like it. It's a lot to take in sometimes, because for anybody that tries to drink from the fire hose that's like JavaScript land, it's can be pretty intense. But uh, you know, uh, I just think it's pretty cool that I can, work with all these frameworks, or enable them in terms of like working on Netlify. So I think it's pretty cool. It's because I was a lead front end before when I was working at dev.to, and I worked in .NET years before that. So like this isn't really back end. It's not really front end. It's kind of like middle end of the build step, kind of like almost like it's plug-in stuff kind of for your build. So it's just really interesting work, and challenging for sure, but it's cool stuff.
Yeah, and this is why the whole topic of SSR has been really interesting to me because I'm someone who, when I originally learned web dev, the first thing I kind of like understood as like a way to build and deploy sites was with static site generators. And even
Yeah.
if you're using like create react app, if you're doing it just with like a build command, you're basically creating a static site at the end of the day. Like you're doing a build, you have some sort of publish
Yeah.
directory, and you plug that into a Netlify or something, and it would just do it. And so for a while I was like, okay, I have this project, I plugged it into Netlify, and then it deploys in that project. And I didn't have any concept of what was happening at all. And then at a certain
Yeah.
point, I understood that, okay, it's going through this transformation, and it's building a bunch of static assets, and it's sticking that on a CDN, and that's the project. So that made sense to me. And I started learning about
Yeah.
other static site generators, and like the mental model, it was very clean, it was very clear. And then at a certain
Yeah.
point, I started hearing about SSR, and I heard there's like SSR, and SSR is different from SSG, and so it's server side
Yeah.
rendering. And I didn't really understand what that meant or like what server side rendering was, and it was very confusing to me. And it's funny
Yeah.
because you say like this used to be just the way we made websites, was that you would have some sort of back end server that would get a request, it would build a bunch of HTML, and then it would serve that HTML up to the user. And
Yeah.
like that mental model, it just didn't quite click in my head. Like I didn't really understand like what this meant or like why I would want that or how it was different from SSG. And it took me a really, really long time to kind of like wrap my head around it. So can you kind of
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that and like how is like what is server side rendering and how does it relate to static site generation?
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, if you go back to like when the internet started, like, if you went to like a page, hey, what's going on, B1 mine? Hey, man. Yeah, like back in the day, and I mean, and not even back in the day, there's still sites that do this. Like if you run a WordPress site that's server side rendered, uh, we won't get into caching, but these things can be cached, so you don't have to always go to your database to generate the page and stuff. But like the main concept is like if you wanted to visit a website, you would have to say, like go to coca-cola.com and like it would pull down the whole page, compared to something like, if because it depends when you started doing web development. Like a lot of people, like I'd say over like the last 5 years, a lot of people got introduced to stuff like you're saying static site generation, but also stuff like create React app. So it's like you have this index.html that ends up getting deployed to like Netlify, Cloudflare, Vercel, wherever. And then all of a sudden you're just kind of loading this whole thing. It's like this empty page, and then all of a sudden it just kind of blows up with your content. And that's just not how a lot of sites used to work. And there's still a lot of sites that don't work like that. And there's a lot of reasons too. Like, we won't dive into it too much, but like SEO, search engine optimization, like just getting hits on your page, and Google being able to crawl it. This was like super important for like e-commerce stuff, and just having your page found and stuff. I know Google does crawl JavaScript to be able to see what's going on pages now, but the main point was like it was also, uh, the hardware too. Like back in the day, it's like people would like, I worked at a place where there was literally a server in the other room, and that's where our website was running. And there was no serverless, yet. I can't remember when serverless started becoming a thing. It's early 2010s, I believe, but I'm not
Yeah, sir.
positive.
The what we think of as serverless usually starts with Lambda, which is like 2014, 2015 kind of era. And what's
Yeah.
funny is that if you use serverless, you can server side render with serverless, which is
Yeah, exactly.
interesting,
So that's the
interesting
other
thing.
thing. Yeah. So there's like yeah, server side rendering you can definitely do in serverless too, because the name serverless is always misleading because you still have a server. So like the
Yeah,
the
it's like
main difference is,
wireless. Like
yeah.
wireless has wires, it's just in a different part of the chain.
Yeah, so like so the main difference is like with the like traditional servers is the server's always running, and to some degree the server's always running in serverless too because it's providing stuff for more than you. But basically serverless, it's like when you need it, it's going to spin up and run. And so that's kind of like very high level main difference between that and like a traditional web server that's just always running. But in both scenarios, you can definitely server side render the stuff. And that just literally means generate the whole page or a majority of a web page that you're viewing. And once we get into some live coding, we can kind of show this in the dev tools and stuff. But um, I, there was like, I think parts of it were like when the tech first came out, like when I was in high school, like broadband internet didn't exist yet. So like we're talking like I used to be on a modem, which, feel free to Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. But I had like a 14.4K baud modem, which was basically very slow. You're on a landline, like you can't use the phone and stuff, and like super slow connection. So like your page would be loading and it would be like chuck 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 chuck, um, and then broadband kind of came in, I think late or mid 90s, And, so then you got faster internet. But, people were still complaining about pages, excuse me, loading slowly sometimes. So then this whole new thing popped up called Ajax, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, which is nowadays people just say you're making fetch calls or whatever. But like back in the day, it didn't return JSON; it actually returned XML for your data. It changed over time, but the name stuck for a long time, and I still call it that. But so then there's this kind of thing like, okay, let's load part of the page, and then like so it loads fast, and then like we'll use Ajax or fetch calls to just kind of pull in things that we need as we go along, and then that kind of evolved into eventually like single page applications, spas, where it was just like, okay, let's still load a shell, but it's like very minimal shell in a lot of cases, and then just literally load everything on the client side. And things were like that for quite a while. Not everything, obviously, but like a lot of people, like I know, like when I started doing React, that's what I was doing. I was doing single page applications, and you know, I think they're still valuable in certain scenarios, and but it's not necessarily everything. Like, if you're like a Figma app, which I'm sure some folks are familiar with, there's a lot of client interactivity in there. So something like a single page application makes sense there. But like when I was working at dev.to, which is a programming community, it's a heavily content based site. You don't
And
you
it
don't
runs on
need the
Ruby on
client.
Rails, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing that we're kind of not talking about right now. We're kind of talking about JavaScript pretty much on this stream probably, but like a lot of frameworks are out there that aren't JavaScript and they do the server side rendering. So,
Yeah, so things like
be it
Django or Rails or even
yeah,
Laravel, most of that stuff is set up to serve up HTML, and that's kind of
yeah,
always been standard. And then you're saying that we've now moved to this area where we have more heavy JavaScript based applications for spas and things like that. But I think within the last couple, like maybe year or two, we're now seeing the pendulum swing back to now more server side
yeah,
render, or now they're calling them MPAs, multi page application, which is just, what it used to be. You have multiple pages and,
yeah. we're,
the,
we're creating names for things for stuff that already existed. So like, yeah, like you said, an MPA, a multi-page application, is literally what websites were before
Mhm.
single page applications existed. But because we created single page applications, we had to give a name to what
Yeah.
websites were
Yeah, I hear
before.
people
Which,
also call it, like, using a server now, they call it server full instead of
yeah,
serverless.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like, well, it should be
yeah.
server more, actually.
Yeah, I think yeah, you're the one that said that. I heard server more somewhere too. But yeah, no, so there's this kind of like shift. Like there's still single page applications going on, but there's this shift coming back to server side rendering. You're seeing a lot of this too with like edge computing as well, like where all these HTML first frameworks are popping up. But the the thing, Chance Strickland, who's on the remix team, I'm paraphrasing, but he pretty much said something along these lines, because I said what you said before, which is like we're kind of coming full circle and we're going back to the way things were. And like, so like when things first started off, you had a thin client and the server did all the things. And then when we got into spas, that's when it was like the server was thin, and then you had a fat client, where like most of the work was being done there. But now it's not so much the pendulum. I like the way Chance said it. He said it's more like we're going in a spiral, and we're kind of getting closer to where, at some point it's going to be the sweet spot where it just makes sense. But going back to the serverless part, is I think also the whole serverless movement, or not movement, but just the technology has enabled a lot of people to do this stuff a lot cheaper too now. Like, I mean, you could still have, I used to have like shared hosting, which wasn't that great, but that's one way you could share, and you'd pay like, I think I was paying like $6 a month. This is like early 2000s, but now that like serverless is like available, especially on other platforms like Netlify, Cloudflare, Vercel, and all that, like it's just so easy to do these things. You don't even have to manage the server and stuff. So it just kind of enables us to kind of come back. And this kind of ties into what I was saying about the spiral that Chance was saying. Spiral in a good way, not a downward spiral. But
Yeah.
and Tal's in the chat saying, yeah, I thought about this the other day, and we're just defining a new architecture for monolith.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think this is actually a good thing, is that like there were a lot of things people liked about the monolith, and there was a lot of like good productivity wins we got from the monolith. And then once we went away from the monolith into something more distributed, something more like microservice based or just like decoupled, that's the Jamstack's all about decoupling. You get benefits from that as well, but you also lose this really nice DX of like having your whole project in one area. And people who know
yeah,
me know that I'm very big on like the full stack Jamstack, and that was a lot of that was about how do we get back to the niceties of the monolith without necessarily bringing back the downsides. And so I think
yeah,
aiming for a monolithic like development experience without the architectural pitfalls of the monolith is something that we
yeah.
can all kind of like aim towards, that like most people agree is like a nice workflow, as long as you don't have like the actual pitfalls of a monolithic architecture.
Yeah, it sounds contradictory, but I almost feel like saying composable monolith.
Yeah, no, and that's
But
exactly the idea of
yeah,
Redwood, is that like it's like a monolith, but it's not.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think like the technology is in a great place now too, because like we just, I know there's still people that don't have amazing internet, but like just like serverless and everything, it's just kind of we're like in a good space now where we can come back to these things. And again, it's not for everything, but like, and I'm gonna be paraphrasing again here, but like I remember, I don't know if it was Fred K Shot from Astro or it's on the Astro blog, but like, they're not trying to target every kind of web application, but like I think he said something along the lines of like their niche is like what 60% of the web is, which is like content,
Well,
and content, or maybe I said it wrong.
no, you're right. So I want to dig into this actually, because this is exactly what they have said that Astro is aiming towards: content sites, which are things like blogs or documentation or like front pages. But
Yeah.
if that's what you're aiming for, why do you need SSR and not SSG? Because to me, I think if you're creating content, you shouldn't necessarily need a server at all. So I
Yeah.
find that to be really interesting, is that they're saying we're for content, but at the same time they're saying we want SSR. So like, how do you square that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think it depends, and which is the classic answer. But like, for example, say you're, I don't know, some really large newspaper that has their online, like I don't know, like the New York Times or something, and say whoever was architecting that was like, yeah, we're gonna go SSG, we're gonna auto generate all the pages. If you think about that, like depending on how long the newspaper has been around, they probably have archives pages going all the way to like the 1970s, maybe even before that. Realistically, you don't want to auto generate at build time like potentially millions of pages, because your build time is just going to tank and might never even finish. So I think this is where like a hybrid approach can be interesting. So like you pre-generate, like I don't know, maybe like this month's you know articles, or maybe this week's articles, and then as people go to like say, hey, I want to, like you can still generate an index of all the pages probably, but like you could say like, okay, that's Tav's is saying that's how Smashing's doing it. Yeah, so like if I want to read a Smashing magazine article from like 2012, they're probably not going to pre-build it, but when I go to say I want to go see that page, that's when that first request gets made, and that's when it'll server side render, and then it'll get cached somehow using just regular web dev, like just caching headers and stuff. So that's where like I think a hybrid approach makes sense, like because I agree with you, like when do you need to really SSR some things, and like I think that's a nice balance there potentially.
So for
um
Smashing, are they doing that because it would take too long to build the entire site at once?
I would guess so. Like, I don't know what Taos has to say, but like, just imagine generating. Say you had to generate 10,000 pages. Your build time is going to be probably pretty. Okay, they said millions. He said millions of, or he
Yeah,
said, I don't
yeah, this
know.
is what I've heard. Like, if you want to look at like the ultimate, kind of like the thing that would break SSG. Look at like how would you build like MDN, like Mozilla Developer
Yeah,
Network. Like, could you build that with SSG? And for the most part, like no, you cannot unless you use something like
yeah,
Elder.js, which is like a stack side generator that's like built to generate like tens of thousands of pages very
yeah,
quickly. But the vast majority of stack side generators, they just can't handle that kind
yeah.
of load.
The other thing that that differs here too is like why people might do SSG is because like with when you have SSR pages, you could get an error. Like when you go to hit that page, it could just, like, I don't know, couldn't hit the database and, like, or something went wrong. So like the page couldn't load. So you get like a 500 error or something, or you have a graceful error message or something, you know, maybe just reloading the page is fine. But like that could be an argument in some cases why people might want to statically generate these things at build time, because you'll see the error at build time. The other thing too is like if your page is super dynamic, not, and I don't necessarily mean client side, like you might have a lot of dynamic content coming in from the server side, then maybe it makes sense to SSR that and then like cache is needed. You know, it's there's like many ways to slice it, and like I don't want to kind of pigeonhole an answer because like I think it really depends on the kind of thing you're building and like what you're trying to accomplish. Like, like I don't know how Google scales, but like, if you do search queries on Google, that's probably almost it's cached in the back end somewhere, but they're probably still SSRing all those pages when you do a search. You know what I mean? There's no way they
Yeah,
could
because the
statically
sum total
generate
of
it for
things you could search is just like massive. I guess
exactly.
the any question a person could ask. Like, so it's like, how could you? It'd be impossible.
There'd be like the number of permutations, it just there's no way you could do that. But like, you know, you could cache parts of it. Facts, Nikki. What are you building? Yeah. No, it's really, and I know people get annoyed when you give that it depends thing, but it really does depend what you're building,
Well,
like
it's depends, and then you say what it depends on. Like, it depends is
yeah.
it's only a cop out if you don't say what it depends on.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing is like I was speaking to somebody the other day because not that I'm looking to work anywhere, but I always speak to people, because people are always in your LinkedIn messages or whatever. And somebody was talking to me about how they had like, I mean, they wanted me to work there, but they were just basically saying like
Who
they
wouldn't
have this
want you to
like
work for them? You're Nikki T.
oh, well, thanks for the shout out. But like they were talking about like they had this massive payload, not making a like a fetch request, but like the actual page loading was loading like 50 megabytes of data. And this is an I just happened to mention to him. I mean, wasn't doing consulting for him. I just giving him an idea, but this is like it's another thing, but it's related to SSR. So you can do streaming SSR, which is like as stuff comes in, it can start rendering the page. And that would be a good use case for if you have a lot of information, but you need these people to start seeing it, you could start streaming it. And this is stuff that's available. Uh, I I don't think it's available just on Edge stuff, but I could be wrong about that. But like I know like at Netlify, because I can't speak for the other platforms, like I know we have streaming SSR on Edge, and so that's interesting. You could just start people, even though the page isn't fully rendered, you can actually start reading like pertinent content. So that again, it depends on what you're building, like how big the data is. There's many ways
Yeah,
to
I'm glad
slice it.
you mentioned streaming actually because there was just an article that came out on Builder.io. This is the company that builds Quick. This is Mishko Hevry, and
Yeah, yeah,
they just wrote an article called "Streaming: Is It Worth It?" And this is a really
yeah,
interesting conversation because it's partly about does the framework support streaming? So I know that with something like React server side, server components, like React server components is this like kind of new paradigm that React 18 has been building towards. And I know that
Yeah.
getting them set up for streaming is like a huge part of that. And there's going to be frameworks that support streaming, frameworks that don't support streaming, and deployment platforms that support streaming, deployment platforms that don't support streaming. So this is, back to
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
question of like, does your framework support it? Does your deployment platform support it? And you have to find both. And then you can combine them like, all right, this does support streaming. Then you get this really nice kind of experience of having stuff just load as it comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it all depends, like, like, yeah, that link I just dropped there that you popped up, it says SSR, but it's a patterns.dev. It's a really great website, but they talk about streaming in there in general. It's not talking about a specific framework. I'm not, an expert in that yet or anything, but I worked with it recently, and it's just really nice. You got this buffer and you're just emptying the buffer, and then, yeah, again, to my point about like that person I was speaking to, how they're having a huge problem just loading like this 50 megabyte page of data, which most people would say like, why are you doing that? But the context of this was, it was like a lot of like scientific documentation and like just like huge amount of data that researchers need to look at. So like the faster they can start reading it, even though the page isn't loaded, made sense. So that,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because there's like, this, I think there's this tendency to look at things like that and just be like, this is wrong. This is bad. You should not do that. And it's like, well,
yeah,
like for most sites, yes, that would be bad. That's a bad experience. And it takes a whole chunk of users in parts of the world and with certain internet connections. It just says like, you can't even attempt to view this. But there's also situations where there is a good reason to do that. And it's like, we should always take that into account, that like it was something that may seem like a bad idea for the vast majority of sites. It can be a bad
yeah,
idea for the vast majority of sites and still be necessary for a very small subset of sites. And that's okay. Like, we all
yeah.
have different use cases.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and like I know, like Remix is SSR first, and you know, uh, it renders the page, but then you just use regular caching that's built into the browser, and so like you serve the page one depending on what the page is. Like if it's something you want to cache for a while, like you just set the cache headers appropriately, so you're you're still getting the benefits of generating this page when you need it, but then it's cache at that point. Like the only time you really don't want to hit the page again like brand new is like if it sorry, I said that wrong. Typically, like if it's stuff where you don't need the page, if the page really isn't changing, the caching can stay for as long as possible. There's ways to invalidate this as well.
Yeah, the
Like
cache headers is a kind of a related but slightly separate topic, which is like, how would you
yeah,
do this type of thing in like a platform, in a within the
yeah,
web platform itself? Whereas like what we're talking about right now is we're talking about how do frameworks set us up for this
yeah.
so that you may or may not necessarily need cache headers. Because with something like what we're gonna do with Astro, it's like, you wouldn't have to necessarily like set a cache header. Like it's just kind
Yeah,
of
the
getting
framework
handled
will
for you.
yeah, the frameworks can like guide you there. I think I'm still pretty new to Astro, so I imagine you can probably override it, like set explicit caching headers if you need to.
Mhm.
Don't quote me on that, but yeah, like the whole point of these meta frameworks or end frameworks, is to just make you productive, So yeah, Tiles is saying Remix has gone back to single server. Uh, yeah, I did a lot of ASP.NET in the day, ASP.NET and ASP.NET MVC. And yeah, that's all server rendered. Solved a few things that should have been solved in things like ASP.NET. Yeah. 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 No, I have to give it like, I made this is a side note, but I made a conscious shift to Node.js and front end dev specifically in 2016. But until that time, I was like pretty much in Microsoft shops doing .NET. But I actually appreciate having had that experience because one, it was, back end experience working with type languages too. And like, I won't derail this conversation, but like TypeScript is created by the same person that created C#, Anders
Yeah,
Hausberg.
I've heard
So
there's some similarities there.
yeah, like you can thank C# for async await. Basically, there's a lot of stuff that came in a TypeScript that got put into the platform itself. I think nullish coalescing too. I could be wrong about that, but um, anyways, that's a small tangent. But anyways,
Languages always learn from other languages. That's one of the great things about web dev and programming. And to me, I kind of think about like like music genres. Like people will look towards like jazz. People will look towards hip hop and be like, oh, like that's a cool beat. I'm gonna steal that. And then like
yeah,
rock
yeah,
people will look towards jazz. Like, oh, that's a cool scale. I'm gonna steal that. And, that's how we all grow
yeah.
together by drawing influences from each other.
Yeah, no, for sure. Uh, we'll get into some live coding soon, but the other thing I'd mentioned too about server-side rendering is there's this other pattern that it got coined by, I believe I'm saying her name correctly, Katie Soiler Miller, who worked at Etsy. She might still be there, I'm not sure. And it's called Islands Architecture. And I'm going to drop a link to a couple things about that if folks want to check that out. But this kind of ties into server-side rendering story as well because those didn't paste together too well. Hold on, let me. That's going to end up being one big thing. Let's just do those separate. There, here, and here. Yeah, they're all good reads. JasonFormat.com that's Jason Miller, who's the creator of Preact and works at Shopify now and previously Google.
And then I'm going to drop one of my own. Actually, I wrote a blog post going over a lot of this history as well. I actually had Ryan
Okay.
Carniato read this over for me and make sure it was all correct. So there's a
Oh,
lot of
that's
good
nice.
resources now about islands and like kind of what this whole like partial hydration thing is, and this will be partly what we'll look at with Astro.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Ryan's a super cool dude. I have the luxury of working with him now. He works at
Yeah.
Netlify. I haven't spoken to him too much because he's super busy, but had a really nice like 1 hour conversation with him when he started, and it was just seems like a really kind person, and honestly, he's just trying to help out frameworks in general. Like obviously, he's working on Solid, but I just like what he's doing in that space. Like it's really he just wants the web to be better, basically. So it's
Yeah, no, very,
anyways.
very big Ryan fan. He was the second guest on this stream. So if you want to check out the
Ah,
backlog,
awesome.
you can find one of those. Then we got some love for the Astro
Yeah.
team. We've also had I've had a lot of the Astro people on my podcast, FS Jam, and they will be coming up on the stream
Cool,
undoubtedly at
cool.
a certain point. People like Ben
Nice.
Holmes and Dan Jatan and Fuzzy Bear, for anyone who knows Fuzzy. Yeah, it was a awesome team of
I don't
people.
know Fuzzy Bear, but sounds cool.
Yeah, he's a foul mouthed Scottish dude. Very fun.
Cool, cool. But yeah, getting back to the islands architecture, this pairs really nicely with server-side rendering because basically think of like an ocean, like just visualize an ocean and you can picture islands on it. And those islands are basically the pockets of interactivity that are on your web page. And like think of your web page as the ocean. Oh, there's
There we
Fuzzy.
go.
All
There's
right.
Fuzzy.
All
What's
right.
up, man?
Cool, cool. Nice, nice. Yeah. Is that how it works? It's like you put out the I love Astro, kind of like the Batman signal, and the Astro team shows up. Anyways, but yeah, so like you have these pockets of interactivity, and that's what the islands are, and it's basically loading only the JavaScript you need for that particular interactivity. Astro supports this as well. I was dabbling with this weekend. Like I said, I'm still super new. I'm literally like probably a day and a half into Astro, but side note, it was really easy to get up and running with Astro, even though I've barely used it. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, it's just this nice way because like you don't like if you think of like I've worked on spas where you're loading up 2 MB, 4 MB of JS in some cases, like fintech apps and stuff, and in this case, you can server side render, boom, you get the quick page, and then you have that interactivity with that little bit of JavaScript that's related to that particular thing. So uh, it's a really nice pattern, and I really love that name Islands architecture because it like meant visualizing it. It's so easy to understand. I find. Um,
Yeah, I
so
remember
yeah,
I used to hear this term sprinkles of JavaScript, and I feel like that's a
yeah,
kind of a similar idea because that was like a Ruby on Rails thing where they would say like with Ruby on Rails, it was server-side rendered, like we've been talking about, but then you kind of sprinkle some JavaScript on top, then that can give you your interactivity. But now we're in a place where you're, dumping a bucket of JavaScript on top of your page,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, maybe we can set ourselves up so you dump that bucket and a lot of it gets kind of filtered out, and then you just get left a little bit of sprinkles on top, and your tooling
Yeah.
will set you up to have the sprinkles, even if you write it like it's a whole bucket.
Yeah. Because like, it might sound obvious when you say it, but like, why load JavaScript that you're never going to use? Like, it just that you're just wasting, you're wasting bandwidth. You're wasting, like, even if you want to even think from like an environmental standpoint, like you're loading all this stuff that's never being used. So like, uh, obviously code splitting helped with that. Like, shout out to Webpack for code splitting and others that followed. But I really like the islands architecture pattern. So I don't
Cool.
know. Did you want to?
Yeah, let's
Yeah, I was
do
gonna
it.
say, you want to jump into it? Okay,
Let's
cool, cool.
start coding some stuff. All right, so we gotta do some screen sharing here, and there we go. Close that up. So I got here, we got our Astro site over here. Got Homie Coder popping in, and got Fuzzy also saying hey. So thank you everyone in the chat for hanging out. We're gonna start
Hey, we
doing
got
some
Homie
actual.
Coder there. Hey, how's
Yeah.
it going, Homie Coder?
All right, and this is Astro's website, astro.build, for people who want to check this out. And should I just grab this guy right here?
Yeah, you can do. Yeah, we can start that up if you want to open up VS Code, or I'm assuming you're using VS Code. I could be wrong, but
Of course. And let's call this AGC Web Dev Astro SSR. And you said just the basics, right?
yeah, we don't need to like build a blog or anything right now. This is really more just to kind
I
of.
do have a blog though, which is still coming together. This is not like complete yet, so you're getting a sneak peek here, but this is built with Astro. This is something that
Okay.
I've been working on for a little while. So if you do want to build a blog, Astro is pretty great for that.
Yeah, no, it looks great. Yeah, so once that's installed, again, like I was mentioning before, like Astro is really neat. They have adapters for all kinds of platforms, so like Netlify, Cloudflare, Vercel. Can't remember where else, but I'll drop a link to the integration guide so like folks can see where you can deploy this to. And
This is interesting. You have strictest, or relaxed, or no
yeah,
TypeScript. I guess
I would go.
relaxed. Ooh,
I'm somebody who's done TypeScript for a long time. If you're doing a greenfield project, I would recommend strict well,
okay.
I'd say strictest, but it doesn't really matter
Okay.
for what we're
So
doing today.
you recommend the recommended.
Yeah, strict's good or
Right,
strict.
cool.
It really doesn't matter because we're not really focusing on TypeScript today.
Word.
But as a side note, though, like if you are working in a TypeScript project or migrating to one, that's you keep things loose in TypeScript until you've kind of made the migration, and then you slowly start tightening things up. But other folks have different opinions. But
let me just get me set up here. I'll go ahead and actually get this onto a repo for people who are curious. I have this one massive GitHub CLI command that I use to.
Yeah, that is pretty monster.
It's epic though, because what it does is it both lets you choose whether it's private or public. It will take your project and then set your remote and then push it and do the entire thing all at once. This is the most proud I've ever been when I wrote this command, and I'm like, I'm gonna use this for the rest of my life.
Okay, cool. So once you got that up, let me know, and then we can add some adapters, and we'll need to modify the astro.config.
All right, cool. So that should be pretty much good. So yeah, so walk me through how to get the adapter set up, and maybe say a little bit about what is an adapter and why would we need one.
Yeah, so basically the adapters, from what I've seen, it allows you for different deployment targets. So like Netlify, Cloudflare, Vercel, or wherever. So I'm just gonna go with the Netlify one. The focus isn't Netlify on this; it's just the one I'm familiar with.
What do you
So
know?
you can do, so you can run npx Astro add and then Netlify,
Just like that.
and yeah, and this is something I like about the Astro project is, well, they have amazing documentation as well, but it's just really is like really quick to just get this set up. Like I'm not joking when I say like I started looking at this on Friday. So
Well, what's funny is that for me, as someone coming from the Redwood world, this is table stakes. Like we've had commands like this for years to set. Like
okay,
we have Redwood setup deploy is our version of this, and so when like
okay,
Astro started doing it, I'm like, okay, good. Like all frameworks should do this. This should just be the way things are, you know.
cool, cool. All right, we're gonna add. We're also gonna add the npm install at astro.js/netlify. And we're gonna need this for when we go to
I think it did that
modify
for
the.
us actually.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
That was me learning it on Friday.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
no, sorry.
if we look
Yeah, it should
here,
be.
we see that right here.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my bad. That was me learning on a Friday evening. Okay, so now if you go to the astro.config.js there, just under your git ignore on the left there.
Yep.
Oh yeah, Fuzzy Bear is giving you a shout out.
Oh,
Fire,
awesome.
firework.
Happy to
Okay,
hear
so
that.
we can see in here. All right, already we're seeing. So if you want to do SSR in Astro, you have to have output server. It's already set there, and we've got the adapter Netlify.
That's
I think
interesting. So
we're
it looks like it assumes that we wanted SSR here.
yeah. Well, because yeah, I guess maybe somebody from the Astro team can speak to it, but I think the fact that you're just adding an adapter, they must assume it's server. I don't know. Okay, so we're set up there. And okay, so now if we just go to the command line, whether you're in iTerm or what is that, warp.dev, I don't know what you're in, but
No,
uh,
this is so that's funny. Actually, I was using Warp for a while. It started randomly crashing. I'm not really sure why, so I kind of popped out. Yeah, with adapters used for SSR deployment. Yeah, so it looks like they assume if you're using one of these adapters,
yeah,
then there's gonna be some sort of SSR involved. But this is just the regular old terminal. But Warp is
okay,
awesome, and as soon as I stopped using it, I'm just like, oh man, how do I get all
yeah.
this sweet functionality that Warp gave me? But yeah, this is just regular old terminal.
Yeah, it makes sense what Fuzzy Bear is saying, because like if you were just doing an SSG, it would just create a build folder, and like wherever you deploy, you just say this is my, like on Netlify, you'd say my directory where I'm deploying to is this folder. So
Uh,
you don't need an adapter. You're just literally generating the files. So that makes sense. Oh, you got a
Interesting.
raid coming in
Awesome.
here. Oh,
Hello, Jen. Thank you
hey,
for the raid.
nice,
How are
nice. Hey,
you
Jen.
all? How's your thing doing? Looks like you went way over. Usually would be done around 10, but looks like you had some Python fun going on. Let's see.
Cool,
Normally we
cool.
ship
Yeah.
static files. Ooh, I pop this open
All right.
here.
So yeah. So at this point, Astro's set up, and it's got the deployment target is Netlify for serverless, not Edge. Um, but let's just start up the app. So let's just do like npm run dev. Um, Now this should load up. If you click on there, it's the like default ash. If you index.astro, this is what it will get rendered here.
All
So there you
right.
go. Welcome to Astro.
Yeah.
Okay, now, so the first thing I want to show here is to show that we're doing server-side rendering here is if you do view page source, because like typically if you're doing, I mean, I guess typically with a statically site generated page too, it would all be there. But like if you compare this to something like say create React app or whatever, where you have your index.html, which is it just kind of blows up in there and then your whole app loads up. Here you can see everything's there is server side rendered.
Yeah, what's cool
Again,
about this is actually fairly readable. So like we have our head, we got some meta tags, we got some scripts here, and then we got our actual page, got our body, we got main. And so this is a good example of like sometimes when you look at what's actually generated from a JavaScript framework, it's just like it's nonsense because it gets like
Yeah.
minified and it gets like smushed down. But it's like you can look at this HTML and you can understand what it's doing.
Yeah, it could be also like because I didn't check like the build output because we're running in dev mode. They might not squish it up because you're in dev mode, just so it's more readable. But yeah, so one thing I want to show is that we're actually running on server side. Is if you go into Visual Studio Code,
Mm-hmm.
I know there, when I speak to people, sometimes a lot of people still aren't familiar with like the Node.js debugger, or if you're using Dino, like it's still using V8, so it's essentially the same debugger. But
Real quick, let me get my Astro extension going here.
yeah, oh yeah, get that IntelliSense going on in the .astro.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the actual page. This is what we're looking at right here. We have our index.astro
Yeah,
file, and so Astro has their own specific file and their own specific kind of syntax. So here we're pulling
yeah,
in these two components, and they're both .astro files, and then we
yeah,
are rendering out what we got right here. So this is like a single file component kind of thing. We got a
yeah.
layout, and then we got our actual HTML. And then we got our style tags.
Yeah. So as somebody new to Astro, I didn't really know how to put a breakpoint in here. So what I did is like, so after your line 3 there, like we're just gonna above line 4. So you want to still stay in the in the
Like
in that
here.
area. Yeah. So like just yeah, exactly. So in there we could do like a let's do like a console.dir and just Astro a capital A.
In
This is
quotes
like
or like
no, just like the
yeah.
object itself. And then
Okay.
after that, just press enter and then type in the keyword debugger. The only reason why I'm using so for folks that might not be familiar with debugging in Node.js or
Which is
JavaScript
me
in general.
right now. I don't know crap about debugging. I don't use I console log everything. So Nick is teaching me right now.
So like I use logging a lot too, but like when there's stuff where I don't understand what's going on, I like to step through the code to understand what's going on, or at least just kind of poke around. So adding a debugger keyword is an explicit way to literally stop the program, so you can do that. There's other ways you can add breakpoints, but because it's a .astro file, I didn't really know how to put a breakpoint in there because it won't pick it up because it's not a JavaScript file. So what we're going to do now is, yeah, so you can see it logging over there, but the debugger is not stopping. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop your just Control C in your terminal for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to go into the integrated terminal in Visual Studio Code if you just want to make your VS Code a little taller.
Okay.
And yeah, so if you do just control backtick or just to get the integrated terminal showing.
Oh, like
Or
I know
I
how to do
forget
this.
how we do
I
it
know what I'm
with
doing. Command
yeah.
J.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now we're not gonna start the project from here. You could, but if you click on the down arrow just beside the plus, beside the ZSH at the top there of the terminal area, the terminal window on the far right. So
The
there's a yeah, so there's there, but if you go to the down arrow beside the plus, there's something called the JavaScript debug terminal. So click that. It's going to launch
okay.
another session here. But what this does is it actually automatically attaches to the Node.js debugger for you. You don't have to do anything. So you could, even if you're running NPM stuff, it just connects. So I just kind of want to show that we're actually stopping in server-side code. So we're going to run the same thing again. So if you just do npm run dev, and then when you go to hit the page, like if you go, okay, so here, the program is stopped. Okay, now it's going to look a little weird here because this is the transpiled code, which I'm assuming the Astro compiler does. Again, like I was saying, I'm not sure how you can put breakpoints in normally unless you're in a JS file in an Astro program or
Okay, so
JSX.
what am I looking at right now?
Okay, so that index.astro file that we were in a second ago, like your other tab, this is what it gets compiled to, or at least the JavaScript part. The markup probably gets pulled out in its own thing.
Okay, so right now this is what we would actually see if we were looking at like like if we went and looked at like view source kind of thing in terms like this is what it's spitting out in terms of like the actual
Yeah.
like generated JavaScript code.
Yeah. There's another thing that ties into this because normally when you're stepping through code, like when I say stepping through code, I mean literally you can go line by line. There's a down arrow there that you see in the debug bar under AJC web dev dash Astro SSR in the middle of the VS Code at the top. Don't press it right now, but you could
Uh, yeah, I'm a
right in the
little
middle
lost
at the
right now. What are
top.
you talking about?
So literally in the middle of your VS Code window at the top, there's this little bar with like a, yeah. So if you
This
click the
stuff.
down
Yeah.
arrow,
Uh-huh.
it's going to go to the next line. And this is how you can stop through code. You can look at things and understand. I honestly don't know how the Astro compiler works, but this is how it's generating the JavaScript.
Okay.
Side note, you don't always end up in the weeds of this compiled code like this. There's something called source maps. I know we're going kind of off topic of SSR for a second here,
Yeah.
but typically like say you wrote a TypeScript file, it would compile down to something like this in JavaScript, but you could actually still step through your TypeScript file because there's this source map that says when I'm in this line of the TypeScript file, I know where it is in that compiled JavaScript. The only thing for me is I don't know how that works with an index.astro file. So that's why we're in like the actual code. Or maybe it's not supported. I don't know. But regardless, I just kind of wanted to do this, not to confuse people. It's really just to say this page, like if you go to your web browser, you're going to see the page is not loaded yet. It's just going to be white probably or hanging wherever you have it open. Maybe it's not that one.
Well,
It's
it is like it's actually hanging. We see the
oh
old
yeah,
one,
it's
but
spinning. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
actually hanging right here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to do this to show you that we are okay. There's TSX source maps now. Okay. So Fuzzy Bear is saying there is some source map story. But I just want to show you this because you can see in the browser itself, the page is not loading because we've stopped the program because we're in the middle of server side rendering it.
Yeah, and you can see
And
all around, like you see actually SSR written here in the code, and then we see
yeah,
that it's kind of like shipping HTML. Like there's HTML embedded in here. There's also all
yeah.
this JavaScript happening as well.
Yeah. So the reason why I put the debugger there is and the console Dura. So like if you hover over that Astro, we'll take a small foray into if you look on the left, there's these variables on the left. There's Astro 2. That's what the Astro object is. It's just called 2 because of the way it was compiled. But I just want to show you that you have access to all these things in here. Like if there was cookies, you could see them. If there's a redirect param, so like say there was a query string, like say you were loading a product for something, the param might be, I don't know, like SKU equals something.
And
You
this
just
is
have
cool. This
all
is
this.
useful for me as someone who's building my blog now. I know that we use this like URL here to when we're generating like your canonical URL for your blog post. It kind of like uses this like
Yeah.
pull stuff out and then sticks it in the head, and then we'll like generate canonical URLs for you.
Yeah. So like you don't always have to debug things. Like I said, like I typically only debug when I'm trying to understand something because console logs for me are great when I kind of know what's going on and I just want to see like what's it spitting out. But in this case, like I'm still new to Astro, so I just want to see what's kind of going on. And so I was inspecting like the Astro object and stuff and just kind of seeing how things are going. But again, my main point was to show that the page isn't loading yet because we've actually paused it. So it's just to, I guess, kind of air quotes, prove that this is server-side rendering. So we're going to let it continue. So if you press the play button in that middle bar at the top there, the blue play
This one?
button, it's going to finish. Yeah. And it looks like it's doing 2 passes maybe. I'm not sure why, but just press play again. That could be something to do with the development environment. I don't know.
There we go.
So now if you go back to your web page, you can see it's no
so
longer
now
spinning
it's
and it's loaded.
whoops.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's because
so
you requested the page again. So anyways, we can stop that there. If you go to the debugger at the top, hit the 2 red plugs in the middle there, and that'll just stop the debugger.
Well,
I just wanted to
learned
show
how to
that
use the
briefly.
debugger finally.
So
Fuzzy's wondering what was your take when you were here for the first time?
I felt pretty comfortable, honestly, Fuzzy Bear. Like, I mean, I've done a lot of debugging in Node and even Dino to some degree, because for folks who aren't aware, we use, for edge functions at Netlify, we use Dino, which is kind of another runtime for JavaScript and TypeScript. But yeah, no, it's kind of neat. Yeah, I guess the only
I know
thing
you
for
said
me,
we weren't gonna deploy this, but I want to deploy this because I feel like it's gonna take like 5 seconds, and I'm curious to see what happens. Because I already have it
hopefully
on
it
a Git
deploys.
repo, so let's hook this up
We'll
and
see.
see what happens.
But yeah, no, like I was saying, Fuzzy, I feel super comfortable. Fuzzy, is it Fuzzy Bear or Fuzzy? I don't know.
It's
I'm just gonna say Fuzzy.
a fuzzy bear.
Okay, a Fuzzy Bear. I was gonna say like I was saying, I literally just started messing around with Astro on Friday night, and I just felt super comfortable in it right away. And we haven't even got to it yet, but I want to talk about the integration. So like I'm pretty familiar with Preact and React, so I thought we could put in the integration for Preact.js, and we can kind of show some Preact islands in Astro because this ties into the SSR story, like I was saying before. Um,
Okay.
Hopefully this works. I don't know. If
Hey,
this doesn't work, we can go do other stuff while that's working.
yeah. Well,
Um,
that's building. We can go ahead and go back into that. So we're gonna add Preact. You said.
yeah.
Should I keep this running in this terminal?
No, you can just stop it wherever. Yeah, there
Okay.
you can stop. Yeah, and you can get out of that terminal. You can just delete it, and
Yeah.
you can go back to your regular one. Um, Side note, that's an easy way to start debugging in JavaScript or Node.js. You can even debug your browser in VS Code, but I don't want to get into all that right now. Um, but you can also just explicitly run Node and say use dash dash inspect brk, which is a way to start the debugger and stop right away. Okay, so we want to add Preact here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do npm install at astrojs/preact.
Like so.
And Preact.js. Yeah.
Preact.js.
There's a lot of stuff you can do in debugging too. You can see the stack trace. You can actually, is that right?
It might just be
Astro.
Preact.
Oh yeah, just Preact. Sorry, that's
Just
my bad.
Preact. Yeah.
Um, there's even a neat feature in the debugger, the V8 debugger at least. I can't speak for like other stuff like script core, like in Bun and stuff, but you can actually rerun parts of the stack trace, so you can go back in the code, kind of what like time travel in Redux was for anybody familiar with Redux, but it doesn't always work, but it's interesting. But it's a whole other topic though. Yeah. So
Okay. So we
so we
got
got
Preact.
that.
So
Okay, so let's
yes.
go to
So
the Astro config.
you can check out the VOD just on Twitch for the next day or two, and I upload all these onto my YouTube account as well.
Cool. He's on the tubes. He's on the tubes.
Yep, the
All right.
tube.
Yeah, so let's just open up the astro.config.mjs file. And okay, so there's an adapter for Netlify there still, but we need to add the one for Preact, and it's not adapter, it's integration, I believe. I just got to double check.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so there's another property. If you under the adapter, if you just add an integrations property, and that integrations property is going to be an array, and it's going to be Preact as a function.
As a
No string,
function.
it's just Preact. Yeah, and if it doesn't find it, just auto import it. If you just if you delete the T and then type it again, the Preact there, it should auto complete it maybe. Auto import. If not, we can just explicitly do it. Okay, it's not finding it. Okay, so now we just need to add. It's a default import, so we're gonna do import Preact from at the top there, just under Netlify, and it's at astrojs/preact.
Like so.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So that should be all good, and we can save that. Let's just start up the application again,
Yep.
and it still should just load what we saw before, just the index.astro page rendered. Okay, we're all good.
Yep. That's all still
Okay.
good. Then let's
All right.
just do this real quick because I always like to do something like this. Hello from AGC and the web devs.
And the web devs. All
There
right.
we go.
I'm just gonna check my work Slack real quickly to make sure nothing's blowing up. All right, cool. We're okay in there. All right. Cool. All right. So, okay. So you see this, the page is still working as expected, but now we have access to Preact. And this, I've heard about this in Astro, but I really like that you can really just start building components out in whatever you're comfortable with. So,
Mhm.
I did a lot of Preact because that's what we used at dev.to. So what we can do is if you open up your folder view on the side there
Mhm.
for a second, so under components, let's just create the components folder. Let's just create a new component. I don't know. Let's just say, let's call it hello.jsx, and we'll actually import your hello AGC web dev. So go
Right.
back into the index.astro. Let's cut out
Sorry,
that paragraph.
grab this right here.
Yeah. And then we'll just do, I personally like named exports, but do a default if you want, whatever. Just so export
Okay.
and
Default export or exports default.
yeah, and you can just do a lambda or arrow function, and then you can just put the JSX you have there or return it. Yeah, you'll have to return it because you have the brackets or the squigglies, the curly boys, as Jason Lengstorff says. Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, put it after, just before the P
Ah,
on line 2.
like so. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah. Okay, so that's good there. Now, if we go back to the index.astro,
And then we're gonna import it.
yeah, so you can call it whatever. Hello makes sense. And then from components, so // components, and it should pop up there. Hello. Okay. You don't need to do the .jsx. It should be able to detect it. Okay, so now in there, let's just add that hello, and
Like
let's
that.
save that. Yeah. Okay. Now
Look
let's
at
reload it. It's not in the card component because the styling's missing. But okay, we can see we've already got that, so that's cool. Let's create another component. Let's just call it island for fun. It has nothing to do with island's architecture aside from it's going to be a demo of what an island is. So
that.
you can kind of let's do another component and maybe pass, I don't know. No, we don't even need to pass anything. We just want to show that it's interactive. So we're going to return a button with an on click.
Like so.
Cool. Yeah. And then in that button, let's just add some text like sup y'all or AJC doing cool shit. I don't know, whatever you want to put. Okay. And then, yeah. So in the button, we're going to add a prop there on click with a capital C. And then it's going to equal with parentheses. And then we can just have an arrow function in there. You'll need to use the parentheses because it's a prop.
Parentheses. Like so.
Or the sorry, the squiggly ones.
Curly's.
I always forget what the squiggly ones are called, but I should just say
Curly's,
curly
yeah.
boys like Jason does.
Curly
Yeah,
boys, yeah.
curlies. Yeah. So in there, we're just going to return an arrow function that just says something like, we'll just do like alert just so we can visually see it. Yeah, curly boys. Yeah.
Alert. Alert. Like so.
Yeah, and I don't, we can say like YOLO or something. YOLO is my favorite word. So, yeah.
Like so. Or
Yeah, just in text
here.
and parentheses.
Ah.
Sorry, in quotes, not parentheses. I don't know why I have parentheses on the brain, but I do. Cool. So, all right, alert YOLO. It's just complaining because you're not returning anything, I think. Oh, you're missing the greater than symbol after the equals in your arrow function on line 3 there, just before the curly boy.
Greater than, oh, yeah. Duh. There we go.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So that's good. Now, let's save that.
All right. And then I got to import this.
Yeah, exactly.
Here. Yep. This will be island, and then island.
Okay, so let's add it. Let's save it. Okay,
Nope.
you're going to click the button. Nothing's happening, right?
Correct.
Okay, so now we're going to use, I'm going to just drop a link to it, but Astro has something called directives. So you're going to add an attribute to the island component, it's going to be
And you look here, we
all
got this
lowercase.
nice
Oh yeah,
auto
there we go.
complete
Yeah,
here. So
yeah.
this is
So we want to
actually a
use
real quick tangent here.
yeah,
Over a year ago, Ben Holmes, who some people here know, he was building a framework called Slinkity, which was about
yeah, yeah,
adding in components to 11D. And so me and him actually spent a decent amount of time working on this framework. So I kept bugging him to like actually put it out. And then once he did, I kind of like felt a certain amount of like responsibility over it. So me and him like were building almost an Astro competitor for a decent chunk of time. And this is where I
yeah,
learned about this, is that you have these client directives which allows you to basically specify specifically whether something is going to be loaded right away, whether it's going to be loaded once it enters the viewport, whether it's going to be loaded on all these different types of just like variants of when do we actually want to
yeah.
load our JavaScript. And this is where we get fine grained control over our islands.
Yeah, no, and it's super neat. I haven't used them all yet, but a lot of them make sense. Like the client visible is kind of like, I'm guessing it uses intersection observer or something as you get closer to it. I'm not sure how that
So
decides
which
when
of
to
these are
load it,
we
but
using?
so we're gonna use client colon load, the second one there,
Okay,
and let's save that. And the page it refreshes so
there
quickly,
we
but you
go.
should be able to click it now. There you go. Okay, now okay, so that's great. We've got some client side interactivity, but what I want to show you now is we're gonna view page source again. So if you click OK on there, and let's make the web browser like the full height here,
Hmm.
and look for island. You're gonna see there's these markup
Right
tags
here.
called Astro dash island.
Yeah.
That's in the styling, but if you continue along, if you look for like less than Astro Island, um, this is where it gets interesting, and it might be easier to actually copy this and paste it into VS Code as
Yeah.
a HTML file, just so we can look at it. Um, okay, and then just change the type at the bottom there where it says
Yeah.
JavaScript.
Yeah.
Change it to HTML, and then right
Yeah.
click and then just say Format Document.
Yep, I got you.
All right, cool.
Okay, so we
So
got
we
our head, we got style, and then we're looking for island
Yeah.
here. So we got
So if we
Astro
go down the bottom,
island.
there is some JavaScript there that's
Okay,
related
here
to
we go.
but so this is
Nikki,
what I want to show
thanks for
here.
joining.
Oh, hey Nikki. Yeah, so the cool thing here is it's client side interactive, but you have the button markup already rendered server side, and it's wrapped in this Astro Dash Island, which is I'm pretty sure you can do this because the web browser is pretty forgiving in terms of because it's not a web component. It's literally a piece of DOM. Sorry, it's an HTML tag that the browser doesn't recognize. So basically, it just says, "Oh, I guess you're like a div or a span." So that's why they can use that, I think. But the interesting things about this, they have some meta information there to properly map things. So the UID is probably related to that specific island instance, maybe. And then you can see it's referencing, I guess, addfs, the file system. It's literally the folder to your island.
Mhm.
It's a default export. There's a bunch of information in here, basically. But
Yeah,
then,
yeah, that's interesting. Because you got one, two, three, four, five, six of these,
yeah,
and yeah, so it's kind of giving us some prop information. It's giving us the actual location it's coming from, and
yeah,
looks like there's some sort of async await going on here.
yeah. So the main thing I wanted to show here is because I don't know what everything here is exactly yet, but like
Mhm.
you can see here that the main thing I want to show is that even though it's an interactive island, it's not like if you think of like create React app where you say build my component and all of a sudden the markup just appears on the page. This starts off with the markup server side rendered, and then the island interactivity kicks in, and that's a huge difference. And there's other frameworks do other things like I know Quick, which is another one. They use something called resumability, which I kind of understand the idea, but I haven't really delved into it.
Yeah,
Um,
I've had him on FS Jam. Resumability is about serializing the entire
yeah,
state of both your application and the framework, so that you can
yeah,
basically stop and start, whether you're on the server or on the client, and basically just take
Yeah.
the state and then like just go. So it doesn't require having a hydration step, because with the hydration step, you have all this JavaScript that gets basically serialized and then gets thrown back to the browser, and then the browser has to re-execute the JavaScript. It's different where it's
Yeah.
all just serialized into HTML, so there's no work that has to be redone. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is different from React with hydration. I'm assuming that because like in
By the way, our
we
site
can check
worked.
that out later. Okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So the thing with like React, for example, is this hydration story. At least from what I've understood, is it's gonna render it server side, and then when it loads, the component re-renders again over the existing markup, and then the interactivity kicks in. If that's not correct, somebody please correct me in the chat. But that's how I've understood it. And I think with the I'm gonna guess here, but with the Astro story, it's like load the markup and then just run the JS. Like there's no like is the markup that got rendered on the server the same as what's currently there that got rendered. And I think the reason is because Astro loads it server side and doesn't do the check after to see if like the markup differs from the component, because that's not what it's trying to do. um, Anyways, but the main thing I wanted to show here was that we get this client side interactivity that just works, and it gets server side rendered, which is super neat.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think
You can even
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that these were kind of the main. This is like the main stuff you wanted to demo, right?
Yeah, and again, the other thing I'd just like to say is like I literally just started messing with Astro on Friday, so I mean I'm super comfortable live coding and stuff, but like it was really super. I don't want to say easy because it's not good to say the word easy, but uh, it was pretty straightforward to get up and running with this, and lots of great docs too. And I
Yeah,
joined the Discord,
I
and
love Astro. I've been a big fan of Astro for a while, and like I said, I actually, so I decided to build my blog with Astro. This is after spending 3 years and trying out 7 different frameworks. I wrote a tweet about this where I think I tried out Gatsby, Elder, SvelteKit, Eleventy, Next, and there's at least one other. So it's like I've run the whole gamut of frameworks, and after trying all of those and then trying out Astro, I'm just like, yes, this is the one. This is what I wanted. It's like it does everything I wanted to do. It has a great DX. Like, such a big fan. And
yeah,
yeah, as we got people here saying, it's very approachable. Docs are top
yeah.
tier. And then obviously we're the ones who are making it great. As Fuzzy says, it's all us. We did everything. Definitely not the team. No, the team did everything. Definitely not us.
Yeah, no, and I really like. I think it was super smart that they support like write components however you want. I don't know
Yeah.
how many people actually would write an app with like like a React component and a Svelte component. I don't think that's the use case. I think it's more like, hey, I'm a Svelte dev, but I want to start using
Yeah, you can
Astro.
come at it
So
with whatever feels comfortable for you, and so it's not about like throwing 5 frameworks onto one page. It's about like whatever framework you want to use, you can use, and I think that's really awesome. And it's I just love the fact that you look at the framework world right now, and I think there's kind of like two opposing camps here. There's like frameworks that want to say our framework's the way to go. Use our framework. It's the best. Every other framework is lame. This is the framework to use. And then there's other ones like Astro that are like, hey, we want to make every framework usable. We want you to have the choice to use whatever framework you're comfortable with. And it's not about saying this framework's the best, all the other frameworks suck. It's about saying, hey, there's a lot of good choices out there these days. And I think
yeah,
this is very much like the Netlify model. I think Netlify has explicitly said we want to make Netlify work for every framework. And we don't want to just say, use this framework. This is the only framework we support. And I think that's awesome. And it's very healthy for the
yeah,
web. And I think it's just like, it's more cooperative, less, it's more cooperation, less competition. And I always say,
yeah.
cooperate, don't compete.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's great seeing the frameworks build off of each other too, like, and everybody ran with Vite when that came out, which came from Vue originally, but it's nice to see it's used like in so many places now. And like I was saying before at the start of the stream, my coworker Ryan Carniato seems like a super cool dude, and just every time I see him tweeting, it's like it's just trying to help something, or like spread some knowledge about things. It's not about like solids the best, which maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't used it yet, but that's not the point of what he's doing. Like like he's just really trying to make the web better, which I think that's really cool. Yeah, Fuzzy Bear says it pretty well. Cooperation greater than competition, for sure. Um,
Totally.
I
Awesome,
I
man.
couldn't agree.
Anything else you want to hit on before we start closing it out here?
No, not really. Just like check out server side rendering. In There's like a ton of frameworks that support it now. Like Astro is obviously one of those. If you're interested in like Dino based framework, Fresh is a new one too that I've dabbled in a bit. There's Enhance. There's WebC. I interviewed my coworker. Uh, Zach, who from 11 fame. He's working on these component based kind of
Yeah, a
approach.
lot of these
This
will
is
be covered in the future. Actually, part of the reason why I started this stream is because like I I'm a big fan of like new frameworks. I think it's really cool. There's a lot of new frameworks out there, and I've been bringing a lot of these people on to talk about the framework on FS Jam. But with FS Jam, it's like
okay.
you talk about it, but you don't get to see code. You don't get to like build something out. And so like
Yeah, yeah,
this is kind of meant to be somewhat of like a companion to a lot of the FS Jam episodes I've been doing. So like if you want to listen to,
okay.
you just search FS Jam Astro, you can find a good episode where we talk to Fred about this. And the idea being with this stream is that we can start like building stuff out with these projects. So a lot of the things you just mentioned will probably be ones that we'll cover into the
Oh,
future.
cool, cool.
And let me just drop your Twitter. So we got Nicky
Oh, thanks, man.
T online. If you want to check out Nick, he's got a lot of great stuff, and he's working at Netlify. So if you're someone who's interested in these types of projects, he's a great person to be in touch with. You also have your own stream. Is that also Nicky T online
Yeah,
on the Twitch?
yeah. It's all if you just go to my Twitter bio, it's livecoding.ca because I'm in Canada and the domain was surprisingly available, but it redirects to my Twitch. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no,
Awesome.
no, thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun. It's always fun because I'm usually interviewing people or I'm streaming on my own, so it's kind of nice to mix it up and be on a stream. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
no,
also,
for sure,
yeah,
man. Yeah, yeah, let's make
definitely
it
got to
happen.
get on Jen's stream. She will definitely be a hoot and a half for you to chat with, and feel free to
Yeah, I've seen her
teach
in
her
the open
whatever.
source Discord. Even though I'm still a lurker in the open source Discord, I see she's Jen's in there too. But yeah, I think the only thing I'd say to kind of round things up is it's just like people do like to complain about a lot of things, but like the tooling has never been better. Even though people might be complaining about current tooling, it's like so amazing. All these, just like thinking of like, just hot module reloading, fast refresh, whatever, like source maps, like, people building their own compilers so you can have stuff like an index.astro or like MDX or whatever. There's just like, honestly, it's like, I feel like it's like the best time to be a web dev right now. So like,
It really
I'm
is.
pumped.
And as Fuzzy is saying here, not only is it a great time to be doing this, but there's also like communities of people who are out there like willing to help you with this stuff. And this is really huge. And
Yeah,
there's a Netlify has a Discord as well. So if you do hit roadblocks, it's like you're not just stuck out there by yourself. It's like if you're using a tool like Astro and something just breaks, you
mhm.
have no idea why, just go to the Discord. There's gonna be an entire team of people who are like there, willing to help and ready to be like, hey, like here's what you're doing wrong,
Yeah,
here's
yeah,
what you can do differently. And, that's awesome, and that's where we can really like come together and like help each other out. Because it's like I remember when I was first learning to code, like it's really daunting to like get into this stuff and stuff just breaks. You have no idea why. You feel like you're just like
yeah.
out out without a paddle. But it's not like that actually. It's like there's a lot of people out there willing to help and can like get you a
Yeah.
lot further than you may think.
No, for sure. I'll kind of end with kind of like what Jason Miller, who created Preact. When I was working at Dev 2, I put like I wasn't asking for help, but I just happened to, I'll post. I posted something where I was having some issue with Preact. I wasn't adding him or anything. I was just saying like, yeah, I'm working on this interesting issue, and I had a link to the forum repo where the issue was. And Jason out of nowhere just starts replying in my PR, try this, try that, and like, you know, I think stuff like that's amazing, like he cares about the project. And I mean, we follow each other now, but like it was just really kind of him to just, he didn't have to come into my PR and just say like, do this, do this. Like he wanted to, and I think I think what I'd leave people with is, like you said, there's community, but like you'd be super surprised how many people really want to help you, whether it's on Twitter, in a Discord, or some other form of community. So yeah, I'm a big fan of open source too. I've been working in it since 2020. So there's that too. Be nice to maintainers, people.
Totally. And
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
Travis, but we are about to sign off, so you'll gotta catch the
Yeah. Yeah.
VOD, unfortunately. But yeah, thank you everyone
Yeah.
who was hanging out with us. This was a ton of fun. I really, really enjoy doing these, and hopefully I'll get us back onto a more consistent weekly schedule. But thank you, Nick, for being here. This is a really
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
demo. So thanks for putting this together. And yeah, as I said, this will be on my YouTube a little bit after this. And if you want to find me, I'm AJC Web Dev on the internet. And yeah, I think we're gonna close it out here.
Cool. See you, everybody.
All right, bye. Always bet on open source. That's right.